Okay, so Andre SOG Ward, successfully defeats Sullivan Barrera via 12-round decision, unanimous decision. The judges had it pretty much similar to the way I had it. I basically pretty much had it 8 rounds to 3 with 1 round even due to the point deduction on Ward for hitting low in a round that he otherwise won. And of course, I gave Ward an extra point for the knockdown that he scored, so that pretty much evened that out. Um, Also, well, I mean, Barrera did pretty good for his effort. He got 3 rounds on my scorecard. One between 2 and 3 rounds between the three judges. It looked like the two of the judges gave him 2 rounds, and then one of them gave him three. So I mean, really, for a fighter that was a bit of a novice as a pro, a guy who had never gone past 8 rounds, Barrera did pretty good for himself. But Ward's class just pretty much shone through. His class, his experience, and just his level of overall ability at the moment. Andre Ward is still definitely one of the pound for pound elites of the sport. Personally, I don't rate him number one. I know some people put him, number one, number two, number three, somewhere in there. I'd say top five, but I mean, my list can change day to day sometimes, and I think most people who are being reasonable and rational will kind of at least put him in the top five, if not maybe a little bit higher. But you never know. It all depends on the justification for who they put where. But I mean, as far as the fight goes, Ward did pretty good. He was getting off the shots pretty nicely, fighting well on the inside and the outside. It seemed like he actually stayed at mid range with Barrera a lot of the time, which I didn't expect. I expected him to try and make it more of an inside rough fight than to do anything else. But I think Barrera's overall strength on the inside, in terms of kind of grappling with Ward, had Andre a little bit paused. So I think he did a pretty smart job of outboxing Barrera from the mid-range distance, and doing some catch and counter, as you saw in the the picture that I put for this video, the thumbnail. That's the excellent catch and counter shot. He caught Barrera's jab with the right hand, countered right over it immediately with a short, only 3 inch possibly punch. Right to Barrera's face, landed very flush. Barrera has an excellent chin though. He took some pretty big flush shots from Ward, and he really didn't show a lot of damage. Ward's face actually showed a little bit of damage from Barrera's punches, showing that Barrera himself is a pretty heavy-handed guy. But Andre was able to take the punches fairly well. He did roll quite a few of them. There wasn't too many really clean punches landed from Barrera. The one clean punch that he was able to land consistently was the jab, and he managed to bruise up Andre Ward's left eye with a lot of those landed jabs, as well as the fact that eventually there was a clash of heads that wound up opening that bruise up into a full-on cut. Before it was just a big red mark from the mid-rounds, and then finally a cut opened up around, what was that, about the 8th or the 9th round, something like that. It was pretty funny because that was about a round after the ref had ruled the point deduction for Ward for hitting low, and it seemed like the crowd thought that he was warning Ward again, but he was actually helping Ward out in terms of ruling that the cut was from a head clash as opposed to a punch. So if the fight would have gotten stopped because of that cut, Ward of course wouldn't have lost. He would have still been ahead on the scorecards as opposed to losing by TKO. But otherwise, I mean, Ward did a good job. He still looked pretty sharp. Definitely sharper than he had looked against Paul Smith, and really against a better opponent too. Barrera's certainly a better fighter. Has more ability than Smith, regardless of his relative inexperience compared to Smith. And I mean, Ward looked pretty good. It looks like Kovalev was saying on Twitter that he'd love to fight Ward in November, and it's looking like Ward may just go straight to Kovalev next, as opposed to taking a fight in between this fight here, Barrera and Kovalev. So I mean, I'm down for it. I'd love to see these two clash, and I mean the winner is definitely at least number two pound for pound, if not number one. I know a lot of people will probably rate the winner at number one on some people's lists. That will depend on, I think, in terms of my opinion, I'd say that depends on who ultimately wins and the way that they win, more so than who wins actually. Um, the fashion that the winner uh, gets victory. But I mean, Ward looks pretty good. And I mean, going up against Kovalev, really, Kovalev is gonna be his probably his toughest opponent and his best opponent resume wise on paper. I mean, Kovalev hasn't shown any weakness the way that Kessler kind of did, the way that Froch kind of did. Kessler, of course, had already lost to Calzaghe by the time Ward had fought him. He showed a little bit of weakness, mental weakness against Calzaghe, where he was up early and then Calzaghe pretty much took over, especially in the second half, pretty much dominated. And then Froch, of course, had been dropped by Jermaine Taylor. He arguably lost to Andre Durrell. I had him losing to Durrell. And then Ward went in there and took care of business against him. But Kovalev has not shown those same kind of weaknesses like those two, who are probably the two biggest wins on Ward's resume. Kovalev is a guy that's been steamrolling guys, and even against Bernard Hopkins, he pretty much pitched a shutout. Hopkins really didn't win a second of that fight. He landed a few good shots, but otherwise, I mean, he got dominated. I mean, Kovalev did what a good young champion should do to an older, formerly great fighter. So I mean, he did his job there. Kovalev versus Ward is a big fight. It's one of the best fights that could be made in the sport, and it looks like they're legit on a collision course. Ward it looks like has to fight Kovalev as part of his HBO contract. Kovalev is binded it to that too. So I mean, that's good. HBO and really all of these networks should try to bind guys more so like that. When there's a burgeoning rivalry between fighters, they really should try to get these guys in binding agreements and then pay them the money that they deserve for those binding agreements. It's like basically say that look, we'll pay you twice as much for this agreement to fight this fighter than we would for anybody else. Anybody else, they should just offer them like not even half as much as they would for the fight that they want to see and that ultimately the fans want to see because the fights that the fans want to see are the ones that are going to bring the ratings and justify the purses and the budget for HBO, for PBC, for Showtime, and everybody else, Unimas, the whole lot of the networks for these fights. So if elite fighters, if championship level fighters are gonna fight scrubs, offer them scrub money to fight scrubs. Offer them maybe 6 figures or whatever, to fight some scrubs. But you're not gonna touch that 7-figure mark unless you're fighting elite opposition. You're not gonna touch that multi-million-dollar mark at least, unless you're fighting elite opposition. That's the way I see it. I mean, if you're a world champion fighting at least if it's a mandatory, okay, I could justify the 7-figure style purses, but in terms of the multi-millions, you got to be fighting your top rivals. You got to be fighting your fellow champions. You got to be fighting the guys that are disputing whatever potential undisputed status you are seeking. And Ward Kovalev is one of those type of fights. Stevenson Kovalev was supposed to be one of those type of fights, but of course, the things get hairy in terms of negotiations. So we never got that one, but we're gonna get Ward Kovalev, and I really think Ward Kovalev is a better fight. I think most people would favor both Ward and Kovalev over Stevenson at the moment. So I think that in terms of fanfare, that's the fight to be made at light heavyweight. And I think it's really a better fight than Ward versus Golovkin as well, because Kovalev has proven several things at light heavyweight. Golovkin has proven that he can bash up and beat down and dominate, fairly good middleweights, fringe championship level middleweights, guys that had already failed against guys like Sergio Martinez and Felix Sturm. But Sergey Kovalev, on the other hand, has been bashing up guys much larger, stronger, and overall more proven than the guys that either Golovkin and in part that Ward has beaten. Kovalev has been knocking out guys with jabs at light heavyweight, and these are light heavyweight opponents. Golovkin's been knocking out middleweight opponents. There's a big difference there. A lot of people, they talk about the fighter's weight, but they don't pay enough attention to the opponent's weight. It's really about the opponents that you're facing that's the bigger determiner, the bigger determining factor as to how you're going to perform in a fight. Andre Ward against Sullivan Barrera, it was one of his tougher fights because Barrera is a bigger, stronger, physical, fighter than most of the super middleweights, regardless of the fact that he lacks the technical abilities of a Froch, for instance. He's just a bigger, stronger guy. And so, with that comes a whole different set of challenges. You could be better skilled than somebody all you want, but if that bigger, stronger guy clubs you upside the head, those skills don't mean jack shit. I mean, that's just the way it is. You know what I mean? And uh, Ward handled it brilliantly. He handled it the way a strong technical fighter with good ability should. And just props to Ward. He's probably going to be fighting Kovalev next. I'm looking forward to it. One of the biggest fights of the year. Probably one of the biggest implication type fights of the last few years. One of the more important fights for the sport in terms of two elite pound for pound level fighters facing off against each other. You don't get those especially often, and it's always a great sight to see when we do, as well as the fact that it's two elite light heavyweight guys. A lot of people also forget the fact that logistically speaking, Andre Ward is the lineal light heavyweight champion. Adonis Stevenson isn't. Ward beat Dawson before. Stevenson, 168 pounds, is below light heavyweight. So under the traditional rules of lineage, Ward is the lineal light heavyweight champion, like it or not. I mean, that's just the way it is. As far as lineage is concerned, Dawson was Ward's leftovers by the time Stevenson got to him. Regardless of the fact that Stevenson wrecked his shit in one round, in a way that Ward didn't come close to doing. But regardless, though, Ward is definitely up there. He should be ranked no worse probably than number 3 in the light heavyweight division. So at worst, you have number 2 versus number 3. At best, number 1 versus number 2 amongst light heavyweights between Kovalev and Ward. I'm ready to see it, and I'm sure everybody else is too. And that's it for this one.